Good evening. On behalf of Jim's family, I want to welcome you here tonight. And I know it means a great deal to them that you are with them, and looking forward to spending some time just honoring Jim's life and telling some of his stories tonight. My name is Carl Ruby. I'm the pastor at Central Christian Church here in town, and I have the distinction of being Jim's brother's Marvin's pastor. So Marvin is one of my all-time favorite people, and don't know what we would do without him and Karen. And it's an honor to be able to be a part of this with your family. I met Jim and Joe in April a couple of years ago, 2018, during what was probably one of the most difficult periods in their lives. That was when they lost their son Jeffrey after a long battle of cancer, and was with them then, and just had a chance to see the strength and the character of this family, and it's an honor to be doing this again. I always like to talk about why we have services like this when we gather, and there are really three reasons why I think it's important to have funerals and memorial services. And the first is just to recognize and acknowledge the value of human life, and to remind ourselves that whenever a life passes, something deeply significant has happened, and it's important to pause and to reflect on how valuable life is and what life means to all of us. And oftentimes, it's a time when it causes us to think about some of the deepest questions of life that we think about when we go through times of grief like this. It's also important because it's a time for recollecting. And as a pastor, I'm always interested in studying the meaning of words. And I looked up the word recollecting, and it's really pretty simple. It's recollecting. It's recollecting memories. And I love watching families do this. As you tell all of those stories that you've probably told year after year after year, and then other people start piping in with other memories and other stories. And that's an important part of why we take this time to step away from our schedules in life and to recollect stories about Jim. And then the third reason is just the importance of comforting one another. And particularly important to comfort Joe right now. And it's as I've worked with this family, I've realized there are a lot of people around you who are going to be loving you and helping you, and that's because you've been such a good mom. And that happens when people have been good parents. Their children and grandkids rally around them, and it's been fun to see that happening. And I know it will continue to happen. Please join me in prayer. Father, thank you for allowing us to be here today during this hour to honor Jim's memory and to comfort those who most deeply feel his loss. Father, we come thanking you for Jim's rich life and for allowing so many who are here to have been a part of it. We are walking through the valley of the shadow of death, and we ask you to take our hand and walk with us. Remind us that life is short and that our days are few. Father, I pray that you would help us to love better. Help us to enjoy life more. Lord, I pray that you would allow Jim's best and greatest qualities to give us a clearer understanding of who you are and what you are like. Draw us closer and tighter into your arms and into your love. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Let me read Jim's obituary. James Richard Jim Riley, on the 14th day of April, Jim Richard Riley, loving husband and father of two, passed away due to complications of Alzheimer's disease at the age of 83. He was surrounded by loved ones. Born at home in Springfield, Ohio on December 29th, 1937, to Albert Eugene Jean and Lorna Jenkins Riley. He was the second of four loving siblings. Jim met and married his wife Joanne in Springfield, Ohio. They were married for 63 years. Always in love with trucks and tractors, Jim first worked at the William Bailey Company, but left at a young age to go into a sand and gravel business with his father. When his father retired, Jim and Joanne started Riley's Asphalt Service in 1974, retiring from there at age 65 when he sold it to a nephew who still has it today. Jim and Joanne spent many happy years in their homes on the water, being near family and friends at one of their homes on Mad River in Indian Lake or in Melbourne, Florida, on the ocean. They hosted countless reunions, parties, and even their oldest grandson's graduation from Wittenberg in their party barn. Jim could often be found singing and whistling on his tractors as he mowed their 11 acres on Mad River or driving one of the cars that he collected. Jim will be remembered for being full of energy, loyal without question, solving problems with the most creative solutions, one-liner funnies, and the ability to drive anything at maximum speed, but mostly for being a doting husband, father, and grandfather. He taught us all so many things, and he will be missed more than words can say. Jim served honorably in the Army Reserves and was preceded in death by his parents, his sister Linda Rowe, and son Jeffrey Riley. But those lucky enough to have had him until today are his wife Joanne Riley, daughter Jennifer and husband Daniel Duncan, grandsons Liam Riley and Malcolm Duncan, great-grandson Ryder Duncan Murray, siblings Marvin and Karen Riley, and Joanne Herring, and a special sister-in-law who was always there, Marianne Goheen. Jim was, he was the second of 4 children born to Jean and Lorna. As the obituary noted, Jim and Marvin's dad worked for a manufacturing company called Robinson and Myers, or just RM. And an important part, as I've listened to the family, a real important part of the family history that continues to kind of have ramifications is that Jim's dad, Gene, also owned a small sand and gravel pit that now lies beneath the C.J. Brown Reservoir. Jim was born on Link Avenue, a street that no longer exists here in town, over in the Laganda neighborhood. He attended Laganda Avenue Grade School, McGuffey School, and Springfield High School. He, Marvin, Mary's husband Dave, and a bunch of other young guys grew up playing with cars, bikes, go-karts, and anything that you could race on. I love seeing some of the pictures that go with the stories you told me yesterday. Jim shadowed his father while Marvin tended to help his mom, who would occasionally tie Marvin with clotheslines to keep him from getting away. We'll remember that over at Central. One of Jim's first jobs was being an inspector for the William and Bailey Glass Company, and he would let Marv into the plant after hours where they built go-karts together. Jim was always very close to his younger brother Marvin, and they are really more than just siblings, but are really lifelong friends who were just always there for one another. When Jim was only 14 years old, he started driving dump trucks for his uncle who had taken over the sand and gravel business. It was interesting. He delivered sand from masonry to just about every major building project that occurred in Springfield during the 1950s and 60s. So his work is reflected over on the campus of Wittenberg, worked with Tower Hall, paved many of the paths and roads there. But you can't go anywhere in Springfield without seeing evidence of his work and his legacy. One day, when he was a young man, his love for things on wheels took him to Hodges Roller Rink, where he met a young girl named Joanne or Joe. Did you go by Joe back then? Anything. Okay. Yesterday, Joe told me that as soon as she saw him, she knew that she was going to marry him, right there at the roller rink. They met on September, and it was funny talking to Joe, because some people will say, yeah, we started dating in this year or that year. She said, we started dating on September 29th, And was it November the same year or the following year that you got the diamond? The same year. He was, I knew that he was fast. I didn't know that he was that fast to get from first date to engagement. So she got her engagement on November 4th, for those of you who are wondering. And that led to 63 years and a really strong marriage. And they never had an argument, I understand. Okay, this funeral's getting out of hand. I shouldn't have said that. During the time that Jim and Joe dated, he would hire or allow his brother Marvin to wash his car, and he would pay Marvin with underage driving opportunities. So Marvin would walk the car and then get to drive them around. They had chauffeured dates, I understand. After they got married, Jim served honorably in the Army Reserves. He loved hanging out at Frisch's or Frisch's, as Jim called it, and that was kind of the place where young people would just hang out. I'm sure meet one another, but a big part of it was showing off their cars and racing up and down the street, and that was a part of their life back then. Marv said, I don't know if that was the time that Jim had the Plymouth that you could hear from a mile away. Was that was a Frisch's car? And that related to one of Jim's trademark one-liners, listen to them pipes. So whenever he hears a loud car or a good motorcycle go flying by, he'll say, listen to them pipes. After he and Joe got married, they settled for a time near Osterlin, and for a period of his life, he also branched off from things with wheels to things with feet, and had horses and ponies. I love seeing some of those pictures, but my understanding is that was an attraction for kids who lived around there, is they would come, and Jim would help them ride the horses, and that was part of what they were known for. One thing I've picked up in just listening to this family is that this is a family that had a lot of fun and shared it with the people around them. Horses weren't quite fast enough, so Jim switched back to boats and to motorcycles. He was known for buying lots of things and getting rid of nothing. And I'm told it's even debatable whether the garage has a concrete floor or not. There's some evidence that it does, but there's so much stuff on top of it that you can't really tell. That was as I listened to the stories, that was a rich time in the Riley family. They were part of a network that included 23 aunts and uncles who did a lot together. And going out to eat, playing cards, having parties, going boating. And they were a loud group. You knew if they were around. Someone commented, you guys always act like you are drunk all the time, but you don't drink a bit. So they were a boisterous lot. They loved to travel, did lots and lots of traveling. Jim bought a 1955 Cadillac hearse, turned it into a camper, later sold it to Marvin. Marvin observed that it would go 90 miles an hour or more. That was not the top end. That was like just partway there. I don't know why either a hearse or a camper would need to go 90 miles an hour. But just linger for a moment on the image of a hearse going 90 miles an hour through Springfield. Their business, the asphalt business, thrived because of Jim's high standards. And he said, if I'm going to do the job, I'm going to do it right. And that work ethic became something very, very valuable that he passed on to his children and grandchildren. That if you're going to do something, do it right. And they were talking about how he was often not the least expensive bid for a job, but he would tell people, you can hire someone else and then you can hire me 2 years from now to come back and fix it. But he had a reputation for just being an honest, hardworking person who was bound, determined to do things right. and that's why one of the reasons the business thrived. He also he held long grudges against people who sold him bad asphalt, and would drive if he bought bad asphalt from someone, he would drive by 20 or 30 years later and comment, they sold junk, absolute junk. Jim was known for swearing at sand or asphalt if it wasn't up to his standards. Jim was known for swearing at lots of things. Lawnmowers that didn't start, tools that slipped, people who slacked off. He had a hot and a quick temper. His anger, like he could get like really, really angry, and then a minute later it was gone. And it was interesting listening to Marvin and others talk about how they learned to do. It's like just let it blow over, and in a couple of minutes it was gone, and he was back to work. If he was working on a car in the garage, you had to approach slowly and carefully. Sometimes, along with the swearing, tools would come flying out of the garage if something wasn't going correctly. Riley described his grandfather as the least organized man he ever met. And Marvin said he filed everything under G, garage. So he loved working out there, and you would never know it based on the cussing and complaining. But he loved to complain, but was also a happy person. I mean, it was a habit, and kind of a part of his act, but was just a happy person who always liked to be blessing the people around him. Behind the cursing and complaining, there was a kind and generous heart. He was the kind of guy who got up at 8 o'clock in the morning to take his dog out for breakfast at McDonald's. And then he would leave the car running so that his dog Brutus could enjoy the air conditioning. So he was a tender-hearted guy. Another image that I came away with was constant activity. Someone who just never, ever stopped. And whether it was picking up sticks in the yard or fiddling around with stuff in the garage or fixing something, but someone, dust never settled on Jim Riley. He was always moving, always busy. But 10 years ago, there was a change in the rhythm. The great mechanic would get confused operating the remote on the TV. He'd endlessly charge batteries that didn't need charging. Using his credit card to buy gas at the pump, a man who could fix anything kind of stumped him. And Jim and his family experienced what Nancy Reagan called the long goodbye of watching someone who you love slip away a little piece at a time. But it was interesting being with him last week and just seeing that his smile remained and his love for his wife remained, his love for his family remained. But that's a difficult thing. It's a difficult thing to watch someone who is so capable and so strong go through that. At one point in the process, Jim said, "If I die today, I'm okay with that. I've done all that I wanted to do." In 2019, he and Joe moved to the Masonic home, first in independent living, later in assisted living. And on Wednesday, with loved ones by his side, after a full and very rich life, he passed away. He died. I asked the family to give me words or phrases that described him. Hot-tempered, goofball, passionate about motion, always in motion, unconditional love, no filter, fantastic grandfather, doting, especially doting on Joe, vigilant about taking care of Joe. Marvin told a story about how he and Jim would go off to do something, and Marvin would think he had a nice day planned, and Jim would fairly soon want to go home because he wanted to make sure Joe was okay, and he wanted to be near her and taking care of her. So whatever started back there in the roller rink led to a strong, strong, deep love that lasted your entire marriage, and his commitment to you was just so evident to the people around you, and you don't always see that. That's a real rich blessing to have. We've come to a time in the service. I've shared some things that I've learned about Jim. It's especially meaningful to have people around a person who lived with the person and knew him really well share some thoughts and memories. And there are a number of friends or members of the family who would like to do that. So if you are one of the people who would like to share a thought or share a memory, you can either come up. I would ask you to use the mic so that everyone can hear it. If you'd like to stay where you are, you can just slip your hand up and I will bring it to you. But who's going to start that? Do you have someone picked to start that? I see someone coming from the back right now.
Hello, my name is Brad Rowe, and I was Uncle Jim's youngest nephew. And I was asked today to read something that my brother Mark Rowe, who's in Arizona right now, wrote. But I would also like to make mention that as an adult, I felt very privileged to realize that I had family reunions that were way better than other people I talked to. Until I probably maybe discovered, I don't know, Disney World, going to Uncle Jim and Aunt Joanne's place at Mad River was absolutely my favorite thing to do. I had so much fun. From, paddle cars to golf carts to everything that we did, to the most recent time I was out there when my soon-to-be wife and I got to ride in the rumble seat of the Model A. Absolute blast. But anyway, I don't want to take too much time, so I'm going to go ahead and read what Mark wrote. He wrote, "One thing distinguishable about Uncle Jim was his laugh. You could tell it in a second. I remember at family reunions, you always knew where he was. Very, very big laugh. I also like his attitude of allowing you to do things, such as when we were kids, probably at a Riley reunion at the river. I remember Jeff and Jenny both had mopeds that looked like so much fun, but the conservative parents thought it was a bit risky. But Uncle Jim stepped up and said, 'Let them ride it. I'll walk alongside to make sure they're okay so they don't get hurt.' Well, we ended up riding those mopeds for hours, and it was a blast. Thanks, Uncle Jim." I'll never forget the first day that I worked for Uncle Jim. By the way, Mark, Mike, my two brothers, and I all got to work for Riley's Asphalt and had a lot of good times. Mark goes on to say, "I was up all night hanging with friends, and had just gotten home about an hour ago. Jim asked if I want to work for him, and he wanted me to do it that very day. Okay, so I said yes, and he put me in the driver's seat of a dump truck immediately without any CDL license. At the time, I thought he was trying to get me to tear the truck up by pushing the gas pedal to the floor before shifting into the next gear. But I quickly learned that was how you did it. Of course, a lot of memories are working with him. There was never a dull moment. Uncle Jim was a perfectionist about his jobs, and it always showed up in the finished work. Which reminds me of one day on the job where Jim showed up as we were already in the process of paving the driveway, and it wasn't right to his liking. I think he was yelling at Roger, the roller guy, and Jim started walking through the asphalt and kicking it because it wasn't right. Mike was working there too at the time and followed right after Uncle Jim and did the same thing and yelled at the roller guy just like Jim did. I'll never forget the look on Jim's face. I think he was kind of astonished and proud at the same time, thinking Mike had some Riley in him too. Uncle Jim was also very endearing to Grandma and Grandpa. Like clockwork, him and Aunt Joanne would take them out to dinner every week. He also had me and Mike go to Grandma and Grandpa's and rake their leaves and clean out their gutters every fall. We would put the leaves in the dump truck to get rid of them, though one time we forgot the tarp on the top of the truck, and by the time we got to the river, there wasn't a leaf left. I always appreciated him doing that for them, and though we would have done it without pay, he paid us every time. We will miss you, Uncle Jim.
I had to write down a few things because I always forget and think about it after I sit down. What can I say about one of the best guys that ever lived? I mean, this guy, he meant everything to all of us. As the oldest of the nieces and nephews, I got to be with him quite a bit when I was younger, before the other ones even came along. Some of my fondest memories are going to their house when they lived on Tecumseh, and when I was about 11, he took me on some of his dump truck runs, and I got to go with him, ride along in the big dump truck. I thought that was a big thrill. Aunt Joanne and Uncle Jim were only 11 and 12 years older than me, so they were more like older brother and sister than aunts and uncles. I can remember when they were first married. I remember before they were married. It was just, everything was so much fun with him. He would just make everything a blast. Him and his dad were working together, and when I'd play with his sister Linda and his niece Rennie a lot of times and go to his house and sometimes spend the night with Linda, and we'd have a blast. We'd steal apples from the neighbors and do things like that, you know, little trouble. No one could get me to laugh like Uncle Jim could. I mean, he was so funny. Everything he said was so entertaining. One time I was at their house for Father's Day weekend, and he cut Joanne's flowers down with his new weed whacker he just got for Father's Day. And he looked at me and said, "I'm the only guy that can catch hell with his Father's Day gift." And she was out there yelling at him. I remember so many things. One time he tried to get me to ride a motorcycle. He had some old motorcycle, and we were over at near his dad's house. I'm not sure. I remember that he got on the motorcycle, and I was afraid to get on. I was little, and I was afraid to get on. And he said, "There's nothing to it. There's nothing to it. It's a lot of fun. Watch." So he gets on it. He takes off. He slides on some gravel, and down he goes. And I said, "Yeah, lots of fun. No thanks." So I wouldn't go with him. But he was always so adventuresome and so much fun. Whenever we came, he was already ready to drive us around. We lived in Michigan, so when we came, he'd drive us around. We'd be in a boat, or we'd be in an old car, or a dump truck, or anything. You never knew what you were going to end up doing with Uncle Jim. Nobody was a better host than Aunt Joanne and Uncle Jim. I mean, the parties were always so much fun. My daughter looked forward to coming. We used to come when she was little, and she'd play with Jenny. They were about the same age, and Jeff, and they were the best. They were the best. I don't know what we would have done without these two for entertainment, if nothing else, right? And it's so sad when we lose our family. I remember my mom saying to me, "Oh, I just hate seeing my aunts and uncles getting older and losing them." And now I know exactly how she felt, what she meant. we were so blessed to have him in our lives. My heart goes out to all of you because you've all lost something precious. And he'll always be in our hearts. Thank you.
I got elected to speak on behalf of my grandma Mary and my mom Cindy and the rest of our family. You've all heard about Jim Riley, but from the day I was born, he was Uncle Ben, and Joanne was Aunt Way. My Uncle Randy, when he was young, bestowed these names upon them. We aren't sure where Way came from, so don't ask. We think it's because she was always going away. But to me, giving someone a nickname is a form of endearment, and there are no two people who could deserve that more. My own memories are filled with big family Christmases on Old Columbus Road, golf cart rides on River Road, Heather and I taking it on 2 wheels, the party barn, fireworks on the boat at Indian Lake, visiting in Florida each year, and Uncle Ben desperately trying to teach me to dive into the pool. I still can't dive, but that man tried his hardest. He was so patient with us kids, and my mom said he was patient with them too, teaching her how to drive. He found humor in most everything, as you've heard. Like one of the many times my mom and friends, and probably several cousins in this room, decided to toilet paper Aunt Way and Uncle Ben. Well, Uncle Ben caught them and invited them in for hot chocolate. And that's a good thing, too, because there was a giant hornet's nest in that tree they were hiding under. My Graham spent so much time with Aunt Way and Uncle Ben. They all rode motorcycles together. I can only imagine Uncle Ben's face and his laugh when my Graham drove her motorcycle into some rose bushes down a small embankment, losing her glasses. Then she showed up the next day to take the test to get her motorcycle's license with Aunt Way. Well, the memories that they have and the stories that we've heard. The legacy he is leaving is great. There's not a time I will think of him without a smile. He loved to tell me stories of their horses, especially Sassy and Silver. I've had horses since I was 13 and now run a nonprofit therapeutic riding program serving those with special needs. 2 summers ago, I got to put Uncle Ben on one of our therapists. I'm not sure I've ever seen him smile so big. I will hold that in my heart forever. Many of you know my grandpa, and he missed some of my childhood for various reasons. But Uncle Ben was always there, and very much in the top rankings of right with my grandpa. Today we celebrate his life and all of the lives that he touched with his infectious smile and big laughs. And with that, I'd like to leave you with a poem that I found that really touched me. 1,000,000 times I've needed you, 1,000,000 times I've cried. If love alone could save you, you never would have died. In life I loved you dearly, in death I love you still. In my heart you hold a place no one else could ever fill. It broke my heart to lose you, but you didn't go alone. Part of me went with you the day that God took you home.
And I think Jennifer's going to speak.
Hi, I'm Jennifer, Jim and Joanne's daughter. I first want to say a wonderful thank you to Pastor Carl for always being here for our family. And you've just been such an important part of our most difficult moments. And to my dear Aunt Mary, everyone needs an Aunt Mary, who has been there. You cannot even imagine the things Aunt Mary has done for our family, and just forever, but particularly in the last, 3 years. And so everyone should give her a hug. She's vaccinated. And Uncle Marv has done the same thing in a more kind of invisible fashion, but he has done so much for our family and keeping things working and moving. And today we got to drive the 57 out together. and reminisced about Dad in the car on the way. And it really meant a lot to me. They have a very deep sibling bond, and it's just, I know how hard that is to lose your sibling, and so I am so thankful for you, Uncle Marv. And I just want to, throughout this process, we've had a lot of Jeff around us as well, and just, he's been here with us throughout this. This has been, a long road for us, and it's been kind of oddly, completely sad and oddly beautiful at the same time to celebrate their lives, my dad and my brother, and to really, take the moment to stop and think about them and to hear these stories and to do the things that we're doing. So, and thank you to so many of you out there, nieces and nephews of my dad, who have just pitched in and been there and done all kinds of things for us that are immeasurable. It's really, meant the world to all of us, and I don't know what we would have done without such a beautiful and wonderful and loving, unconditionally loving family. So thank you to all of you. And, we were able to have visitation lifted for my dad a few weeks ago, and have people into the Masonic home. We were supposed to have 2 people at a time, and, well, sometimes we had 2. But I was surprised how many people came to visit him, and wanted to be there, and it was such a wonderful tribute for him to have that love around him at the end of his life, and to have all of that beauty and appreciation, and it was amazing to have so many of you come and be there with him and with us, and I described it as a gift. It was really a gift to have that. So I wrote something that I wanted to share, and I hope I'm going to get through it, and if not, Dan will back me out. So, rain or shine, snow or beachy sun, my dad always knew how to make the most of the moment. He was always there for us, all of us. My mom, Jeff, me, our cousins, aunts, uncles, grandparents, friends, anyone that needed something. From teaching most of us to drive, that's why we can all drive stick shift, to his work clearing so many roads during the scary blizzard of '78 here in Springfield, to the introduction of so many of us to the sunny beaches of Florida, he was a driving force that gave so much to so many people. My sons and husband listened to a song called How Did You Love? This particular song tries to address the impact you have on your world, in your life. That's a hard thing to measure. But perhaps the moment when we all must pass, the measure of your legacy is the amount of genuine love you were able to give. And my dad left that legacy so beautifully, and it was always unconditional. A beloved brother for 83 years, a devoted husband for nearly 63 years, an uncle for 63 years, a father for 55 years, a grandfather for 24 years, and a great-grandfather for nearly 3 years. He knew love. He shared his love. He showed us how to love, and he was so dearly loved. I often wonder if he was able to give so much love because he lived his passion and spent his days doing the things that he loved most. His love for motors was so obvious to everyone, as I'm sure everyone here knows. And at one time, we counted over 50 motors that were in and around the barns. You can be sure that all of them ran just fine. Some were as small as the vacuum he used for the driveway. Who else would vacuum their 2-acre driveway but my dad? And some of them were powerful diesels that could move heaven and earth. But all of them had meaning to him. From the 34 Plymouth coupe that he and my mom bought when they were engaged and still have today, but we couldn't quite get out here, though we all tried, to the Ford and Massey Ferguson tractors from the 30s that he still has today and are still used today to mow the river. He has a loader from the 1950s that he also still has that we went out and Ryder almost sat in today. It was one of his favorites. He used to wait until we came to visit from Oregon with the grandsons, and then he would have some fun job to do with it around the property, like push a tree around, pick up something heavy, lift a grandkid in the bucket. There are so many ways to have fun with machinery with Jim Riley. With a twinkle in his eye and a smile that didn't hide his sense of humor, we have so many memories of him that will always be with us. There was the time he decided to race a younger Dan in the O of the driveway at the river. He ended up winning the race, not because Dan led him or because he was faster, but because there was dew on the grass, and he passed Dan as he accidentally slid over the finish line. Feet first. And when we moved to Oregon, he had generously offered us his old tool van from Riley's Asphalt that he was about to sell to use as our moving truck on the cross-country trek. It was a 1976 GMC with 176,000 miles on it. And although it couldn't, I'm not kidding you, go faster than 55 miles an hour on the interstate unless we were going downhill, and it lost a tire in Iowa and a transmission in Idaho, it ended up crossing the finish line in Oregon. But as he walked off the plane for the first time when he came to visit us in Oregon, the first thing he said, back when you could go to the gate, was, I kept looking down there and thinking, I can't believe my truck made it all that way. Of course, during that journey, and every journey we still take, we always use his driving advice, such as, if you're going to get in the show-off lane, you better show off. And I guess that guy takes his half out of the middle when someone is not staying in their own lane. We use that a lot. Mom and Dad showed up to be with their grandchildren at all of their births. Liam and Riley were 11 and 12 days late, but they stayed anyway and waited by our sides. Malcolm, also known as Little Jim, due to their uniquely similar zeal for life, came a little too early, but Mom and Dad were there before I left the hospital. Dad was by my side, holding my hand as I labored for hours with 10.5-pound Riley. His encouragement of watching the contraction graph was not really so helpful. That was a good one. It's not really something that makes you feel better when your pain is being graphed. But nonetheless, it was comfort to have him there, helping me through it all. And when they weren't really ready for a bottle, Dad learned how to tape a tube around his finger that attached to a syringe of milk to help feed them. He loved taking care of those babies, and still today. But one of my favorite memories was like a scene from a Norman Rockwell painting. Dad and 4-year-old Liam were playing around with his old cars. I had gone to town, and I was coming back in a car he didn't recognize. I passed them on River Road. Dad driving his 57 Ford Fairlane that's out front, and Liam standing right behind him, head out the window. No car seat, no seat belt, no need for a seat even. The two of them were in high heaven with huge smiles on their faces, headed nowhere but happy to be moving and rumbling down that country road. They were way happier than Jeff and I were as kids, riding around the beach towns of Florida in the back of that VW van that they used to tow behind the RV. It didn't have any seats in the back. And it's not easy to make the corners when you have to hang onto the window in your sibling's lawn chair, hoping he has a good grip on your chair in his window. And then there was the time that he and 14-year-old Riley mowed the north field at the house together. One of them on each of his old tractors with bush hogs, riding around with sunglasses, happy, content, and weaving around each other's mowed paths like an intricate dance of fireflies. I often wondered why Dad had 2 tractors fitted with bush hogs. Who needs 2? But maybe it was just for that moment. In 2010, Mom and Dad drove to Oregon and picked up Jeff along the way. Liam, Riley, Malcolm, and I hopped in there, and there we were, 7 people and a dog, making our way to Ohio via Yosemite National Park, Zion National Park, Bryce Canyon, and the North Rim of the Grand Canyon, and an RV meant for 2. We were all a little jealous of Uncle Jeff's attempt at privacy by sleeping under the dining room table. And Malcolm kept us all on point at the Grand Canyon, where Malcolm, who is as terrified as heights as Dad and I, was only 5 years old and didn't understand that right behind the scrubby bush was the biggest drop-off he could even imagine. Dad and I didn't relax that day, constantly keeping Malcolm attached. And when we were leaving Yosemite and oohing and awing at the scenery along a road that ran along a sheer drop-off for many miles, we nearly lost the air brakes as we trekked down that long, steep decline due to a malfunction in the tow car that we were pulling behind. Dad kept us cool and didn't really tell the rest of us what was happening until he finally found a place that he could pull over on the side of the road. He had to put the RV in reverse at that point to keep it in place, and he told Jeff and I to run and get rocks to put under the tires and hold it until the brakes could refill with air. I was always amazed at that bravery. I really didn't know there was any issue until he pulled off. I can only imagine how he was feeling, trying to find a pull-off before we were in more serious trouble. As his disease progressed, this full of energy, loved to keep moving man only wandered off a few times. In all cases, he was looking for Mom because he was always worried about her and wanted to be sure she was okay. Even when it was hard to keep things in his mind, he always kept this as his top priority. It was just who he was, disease or not. His love led his life, and if you've spent time with the two of them, you've seen this firsthand. That's unconditional love. That's as beautiful as love gets. That's who Dad was. Honorable, brave, problem-solving in any condition, and above all, loving. That's his legacy, and how he has always lived in our hearts and will always continue to be with us there. He will be so greatly missed, so dearly remembered, and so humbly honored by all of us. Thank you.
I think that's worthy of an applause. I'm going to close with a reading of the 23rd Psalm and a prayer. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Please join me in prayer. Father, we come to you tonight, Lord, thankful for life, and in particular, thankful for Jim's life. And Lord, I am reminded that the best and most noble qualities of Jim are reflections of you. And Lord, you are a God who loves passionately, and you are a God who enjoys your children, a God who is loyal and faithful, and we thank you for the opportunity to see those qualities in Jim. Lord, I lift up his family now, and I pray for a work of your grace in their lives. I pray that you would remind them of how deeply you love them. I pray that you would comfort them in this time of great loss, and I pray that you would take the best qualities of Jim and make them a greater part of who each of us are. We ask this in Jesus' name, amen. There is another song that the family has picked out, and then one of the team here at Littleton and Rowe will be in to dismiss us, and they will dismiss people from the back, working this way, giving you an opportunity to come and share a few words of support with the family if you would like to do that.